All right, so let's start this off. I don't have my presenter notes. This isn't my slide deck, so I don't know what I'm polling you on, but let's say, how many of you are using Puppet? Okay, most of you. How many have been using Puppet for a year? 2 years? 3 years? 4 or more? All right, cool. Anybody Puppet Enterprise? Okay. And yeah, let's leave the poll at that, since I can't remember what else was on there. So I came to Puppet Labs as a sysadmin at Penn State. I was responsible for IT there at graduate school, and then I moved on to central IT. And one of the things that was interesting to me, the transformation started way before I was a sysadmin at Penn State, but I started to feel it for Penn State in their shift in thinking about IT, and getting from, it's not echoing as much, but so Penn State, the machines that were in the central IT unit before I came in there were all hand-built, all lovingly crafted with special names that were cared for as often as the sysadmins could. But we didn't have that many sysadmins at Penn State. So at Penn State we had AIX, Solaris, Windows, Red Hat Linux, Debian Linux, and I think that was it. And so we had about 2 sysadmins per operating system that specialized in that, and then Linux was just combined, myself and another sysadmin were responsible for the Linux systems. And the shift that was going on is that you need to build more systems more quickly to service the things that the university wanted to do, or whatever your organization is trying to do. And handcrafted systems just weren't cutting it. So one of the mandates on me when they hired me in was to figure out a way of automating everything. We had no configuration management systems. The best way of building a new machine was to clone our VMware template and get going with that, but that just didn't cut it. So I looked at Puppet, I looked at ZF Engine, I looked at Chef. I ended up choosing Puppet. It spoke to me, and I really appreciated what it did for me. And I ended up getting us to the point where our Red Hat and our Debian systems could be kickstarted or seeded up, and we just had our configuration ready to go. I started small, I started with NTP, started with my SSH configuration, I started with the things that we had to do every time we build a new machine, then worked our way up to the point where, for instance, our shibboleth infrastructure at Penn State was all being managed by Puppet. And what that enabled us to do in addition was be able to let the application administrator who had to go and manage particular configuration files with shibboleth but didn't care or didn't really want to work with how the system was configured, he could just edit his configuration files on our GPFS file system, run Puppet. Puppet would update them. It would take it out of the load balancer. It would run health checks. It would put it back in the load balancer. Everything was fully automated for him, and he was able to do updates in 5 minutes. It used to take him a whole day. He would dedicate an entire day to updating a single configuration file. So that was the state of IT at Penn State, and Puppet really radically transformed how we did things. I'm hoping you have a similar story as well. Right? So the idea is being able to do more faster, and I think this slide should also say more reliably. We had a Samba service that we offered out. From our shared file system, we offered Samba to all of our Windows clients. And it was a cluster of about 6 machines. And when I walked in, each of those 6 was configured differently. 3 of those 6 had different Samba versions. So when people would call the help desk saying, "Oh, I can't do this," we would try to replicate it, and we would replicate it on the system that had the newer version of Samba. It worked just fine, and hadn't thought about the other 3 that were breaking every time. So do more faster. So these old practices that I walked into were constraints. They were things that got in our way, and they weren't helpful. And those things are gone now. We have to move faster. At least from Penn State's perspective, they weren't having it. We had to move faster. We had to build better systems more quickly. So we recently did a survey to people that self-reported as being DevOps organizations, practicing the ideology of DevOps. And one of the main components of that survey was gathering information from all these companies and starting to do an analysis on these. And I forget exactly what the criteria was, but is it Fortune or someone else? Someone's going to correct me later, but the definition of high-performing organizations that are able to really quickly deliver business value with IT, we're reporting that 89% of those companies are using version control and 82% are using some form of automation, whether it be configuration management software or things like BladeLogic's tools, stuff like that. It's clear that there's something that these companies are doing right and that you're doing right by being here, by being interested in Puppet, and almost the entire room using Puppet. These are things that this company really cares about doing. We're here to help you change your business quickly and effectively. So in terms of our customer base, it's just a matter of saying people have used Puppet for doing pretty much anything. It is a framework. At its core, it's a framework for managing systems, anything from managing desktop systems for your administrative staff up to hosting high-end web services that you need for online banking or entertainment, all kind of cross-sections, all kinds of use cases. Puppet's there, and people are successful with it. So if you're new to Puppet, I want to take a few slides here to just go back over the basics or give you a review if you're familiar with it already. So the first step in using Puppet is to define what your infrastructure looks like. And we call it defining your infrastructure as code. It's not code in like writing C++, but it is text that looks a bit like code. It's a little bit squashed in there, but what you're describing is the state of the system that you want. I'm going to show you a bigger slide in a minute, but in this case, I want a package, it should be installed, it should be the SSH package, and I should have a service SSHD running. You're describing the state of your infrastructure, the thing that you want to be there at the end of the day, not procedures on how to get there. It's all about describing the infrastructure as you need it to be in code. So once you have that, and again, it's reusable stuff that you can say, okay, this machine gets it, then this machine gets it, then the other machine gets it. You're defining that once and reusing it as much as you like. But Puppet gives you the ability to inspect how the system is currently configured and simulate what changes would occur to bring it back into the state it needs. So in this example of a package and a service, that simulation could be, package SSH isn't there, I would install it for you if you wanted me to. The service isn't running, it would tell you, I would restart the service if you want me to. That third step in the bottom right is that enforcement step. It's the same kind of thing. Puppet's going to inspect the state of your system. It's going to compare that to how you define your infrastructure, and it will enforce changes when appropriate. It will install that package, it'll restart the service, or start it if it's stopped. And finally, it reports on all those things. So if you're looking at bash scripts as being the way that you currently do automation, and that was the way it was at Penn State as well for me, you were able to do kind of these first steps. You were sort of defining the state of your infrastructure in bash scripts. You were running them to enforce the state. But not only was that a little bit hokey, it wasn't super readable, but you certainly didn't get robust reporting at the end of the day about what happened, what changes occurred, what the state of the system was before the bash script ran. You just don't get that. Bash isn't supposed to do that. It's not a tool for that. So that's one key component that software like Puppet gives you the ability to do. So when you do a run with Puppet, the first thing that happens is that machine you're managing, the guy up top, the node, we call them nodes, it sends facts about itself to the Puppet master. Those facts are, what operating system am I running, what's my IP address, what interfaces do I have, am I running on a virtual platform or not, all kinds of things. There's hundreds of facts by default, and you can extend more facts from the Puppet Forge. But it sends that information to the Puppet master. The Puppet master uses that information to dynamically build a configuration that's specific to that node, and that's called the catalog, specific instructions for that machine. And that catalog gets sent to the node. It'll simulate against that catalog, it'll enforce against that catalog, and then of course it reports back on what happened, what it did. So the architecture for this, again, it doesn't matter, Puppet doesn't matter where you are. You can be on physical hardware, virtual machine, some cloud provider. Puppet will just run on your operating system, whatever it is, a web server, app server, database server. And it has a Puppet, small Puppet agent running on it that'll check into your Puppet master. And so we have our open source platform, which is all the open source projects that we have. Puppet, Factor, Hyra, mCollective. We'll go into more detail on each of those. But we have the platform that's hooked into a reporting mechanism on a website, as well as other reporting mechanisms, workflows for analyzing how your infrastructure is changing, in addition to that raw definition of your infrastructure that is on Puppet Master. It's all that code you've written to say, this is how my machines are configured. And of course, being able to centrally control your systems as well. So here's a larger example of what it looks like to describe infrastructure in Puppet's language. So most of you in the room this will look familiar. That class keyword, think of that not as a programming class, but as the word bucket. That's how I always look at it. It's just a bucket of configuration that you can refer to later. And we're saying for our SSH bucket of configuration, we have a package that should be installed. We have a file that has particular properties we care about, for instance, its owner and group. We're also saying we want to say the content of the file is particular, and the service should be running. We can get dependencies between them, so they all happen in the proper order, but those details aren't important right now. It's a readable definition of what's going on. If you've never seen Puppet before, you look at it for a minute, and it's pretty expressive about what's going on. And if you take the time to learn the Puppet grammar, it's even more simple. So Puppet was built by a community of people. Our CEO, Luke Knies, started writing this when he was at a job that he was getting frustrated with the current software out there to do this work. He started writing this software, started sharing it with other people, and got other people involved in using it, building it, and making it better. So we have several artifacts of the community. We have a Puppet users list. It's a Google group that you can subscribe to on the web or get emails sent to you. And that has nearly doubled in growth over the past year. We're now approaching 6,000 members. Puppet Dev is a list if you want to hack on Puppet, contribute code back. That's a list of people like you that want to talk about Puppet. Ask.puppetlabs.com is a new property. It's kind of a Stack Overflow-like site for asking and answering questions. For people that aren't so into the mailing list, you can do that as well. We also have an IRC channel, which is hugely popular. If you're working on a Puppet manifest, you're saying, oh man, I really could use a little bit of help right now. You jump into Puppet, you ask your question, chances are you'll get an answer right back, and you're back to building your infrastructure. And of course, we have some stats there about how people can interact with the code itself. So like I said, that site is out there. Check that out. And there are so many ways that you can get involved if you're interested in just helping the Puppet project. So you can triage tickets at projects.puppetlabs.com. You can contribute code. You can share your modules on the Puppet board, which is something that makes me very happy if you do that. That's a good poll question. How many of you have used the Forge to download a module? Thank you. How many of you have shared your modules with others? Awesome. I remember each of you. And of course, you can visit this puppetlabs.com/community to see all these links and learn more about each of those properties. So we do have a conference in San Francisco this August. Last year, we had our second conference in San Francisco. This one is going to be like double that size or something like that. We're going to be at the Fairmont Hotel. We bought the whole thing. There's going to be tons of sessions, tons of people, all eager to talk about infrastructure problems. I love this conference. This year is going to be awesome. Check it out if you're able to travel and want to talk about Puppet with people. There are many books out there for learning more about Puppet. I have a couple of them down here that I'll give out throughout the day. We have our Pro Puppet book written by James Turnbull and Jeff McHugh, both Puppet Labs employees, as well as Puppet Types and Providers. There in the top, also written by Puppet Labs employees. This one's more of extending Puppet, writing your own types and providers, writing your own facts and functions, that kind of stuff. Whereas Pro Puppet is kind of from day one, getting your systems up and running, building them to scale, stuff like that. And there's some other books that community members have contributed that are also awesome. Check out these books. I'll learn more. So let's talk about Puppet Enterprise, Puppet Labs' commercial offering. So I mentioned earlier that we had all these disparate projects, Puppet, M-Collective, Factor, Hyra, right? You know what Puppet is. M-Collective is our orchestration framework. Factor is about gathering information about your system. And Hyra is about expressing configuration data. What package name do I need? Here's the package name. What version do I need to install? Here's the version to install. I think we'll talk about that a bit later, and I'll certainly talk about that later in my second talk. But Puppet Enterprise also gives you a graphical interface for interacting with your infrastructure, for viewing all the reports that everybody's sending in, seeing how many machines aren't responding. We have a live management console, which I'll show you the demo later today. That's all about inspecting the state of your system in real time. So you can reach out and say, what are all my packages and how do they differ? Where is the user Ryan across all my machines? And is he the same on all my machines? Without writing any Puppet code, you can inspect those kind of things across all your machines. We also have several cloud provisioners in Puppet Enterprise. Chiefly is the VMware Cloud Provisioner. So if you have a vSphere instance, you can use this tool to say, all right, here's my image type I want to clone. It'll reach out to vSphere, build the machine, install Puppet onto it remotely, connect it to your Puppet Master, and optionally you can then say, when you do connect to Puppet Master, tell it gets NTP, tell it gets this application server. So you can kind of bootstrap a machine with those cloud provisioners. And then of course what you'd expect from a commercial offering, we have access to professional services folks. I left Penn State to be a professional services engineer before I went on to the product, and they're all really talented people, really great at helping you solve a particular challenge with Puppet. You can call them in and say, help us get Git going and get good workflows for Git. You could say, come in and just build my Puppet Master infrastructure. You could say, come in and help me build my application with Puppet. So our services are really broad in what they'll do for you, and they're all just ex-sysadmins just trying to use Puppet to do systems administration. So we also have support as well. If you're using Puppet Enterprise and you need some help with what you're doing, or having trouble using the product, maybe the product breaks, you can call us, get some support in real time. So that graphical interface, again, I mentioned that it has reports here. You can see what's going on, who's changing. You can drill down any of your nodes. You can see inventory data for each of those nodes. Get all of that from a central console. That live management interface, here's an example of inspecting a user resource and seeing how it differs across all your machines. In this case, a selection of 7. But this is something that doesn't use a database to store this information. It uses mCollective to real-time discover all the machines on your network and asynchronously get information from them. So if you have 7 or 7,000 machines, it'll tell you about their user resources and how they differ. I mentioned the cloud provisioning bit. So in addition to the VMware cloud provisioning, there's also Amazon Web Services provisioning, and then on forge.mobillabs.com you can find provisioners for OpenStack, for Google Compute, and other things as well. Same kind of idea there. You're bootstrapping a machine, installing Puppet on it, connecting to the Puppet Master, which is all you really need to do to get Puppet configuring the machine. So we've added some features recently in the Enterprise console, including certificate signing, so you don't have to give someone keys to your Puppet Master in order to sign certificates. They can just get access to the console. And you can authorize access, authenticate access to the Enterprise console via LDAP and OAuth mechanisms. I think Google Apps is directly supported in other OAuth. It's a little bit of trickery, but you can do it. So let's talk about those open source projects. And again, I will be doing a Puppet Enterprise demo later today. You can see this stuff live, and always feel free to ask questions about it. We're happy to talk about it. Puppet's been growing a lot lately. Let me do another poll here and look to Joe to report what the pulse of the room. How many of you are using Puppet 0.25 or earlier? Yeah, that's right. Cover your eyes when you raise your hand. How many of you are using Puppet 2.6? Okay, Puppet 2.7. All right, Puppet 3.0? 3.0 or higher, really? Okay, cool. That's cool. Sorry to call you out on the Puppet 2.5 business. That's just, I look at it this way, that Puppet 2.5 was written when Luke was writing this as a sysadmin trying to do, work that he needed to do. And then Puppet 2.6 was the transition to when he had a company behind him trying to build this stuff. So I kind of, you trust Luke or you trust the company that Luke's built to give you the software you need? So Puppet 3.2 has a recent release. You can go download it today if you want. So it supports Ruby 2.0. Previous releases of Puppet 3.0 supported 1.9. Releases of Puppet prior to 3.0 didn't support 1.9, but it worked more or less. You can now finally, and I wish I had this at Penn State, use external certificate authorities for your Puppet Master. Usually when you're bringing up a Puppet Master, it'll sign its own certificate authority and use that. But now you can say, hey, I've already got a certificate authority that I'm already signing certs with, just use that. It trusts certs that were signed by it. So you can now do that, which is awesome. I'll show you the experimental feature parser in a few minutes here, but sorry, I don't know what happened there. I'll show you the feature parser in just a minute. That's right now the parser that you had is basically the parser that you had through all these versions, and the parser is really you can think of it as the language itself, but it's really just how we parse what you input into the language. And so the feature parser has some new capabilities. Let's just show you that now. So you can use this today with Puppet 3.2.0. If you go into puppet.conf and add into your main section parser equals future, this is not yet a finalized parser. It's future so that you can experiment with it. Hopefully it will be the default parser in the next major release, but right now it's not. The biggest capability it provides is iteration and numeral support. Okay, so you can see how that works here. It's pretty simple. So for anybody that wanted to say, hey, I want to just take a data object and iterate over it and build out multiple user resources or whatever it is you're trying to do, you can do that now. And then you can get more advanced with all of those operators, each for each, and so on. So that's pretty cool. That is in the future parser. Check that out. Give us some feedback on it. Hopefully it will become the finalized parser. If you want to get started with it even quicker, the slides will be up later today on the Puppet Camp site. I think we'll get you a link to where they are. But if you can memorize this right now, this is a module you could download from the Forge and then declare this resource, which just manipulates puppet.conf to add in future parsing. So you get a little meta with it. Use Puppet to activate a new Puppet feature. So this was, as of Puppet 3, dynamic scoping was gone. So those of you that are prior to 3.0, what that really means is, if you declared a variable foo in class, well, let's say it's the way, if you have class foo and variable bar, and then somewhere else you try to reference that bar variable, even within that class, and you just said, hey, use bar for my package name, that would break in 3.0. Because what you were asking Puppet implicitly to do is figure out what scope this is in. So Puppet would encounter bar and would say, okay, who does bar belong to? And it would try to find where you define bar, where you set the value of bar. And it would dynamically go up to the class level, it would go up to the node level, it would look at other classes. And this could get you, I haven't actually taken a look at this example, but this could get you into a situation where you got like someone else in another class, or especially at top scope, declared bar, and now you're not getting the expected result. You would declare your resource and it would get this value from some other place. That was how Puppet used to behave, and it was handy, but it could also get you into trouble, and it was hard to figure out where the trouble came from. So in Puppet 3, we removed that, and the only change that it means is when you use that variable, you have to fully scope it. And all that means is, if you declared var in class name parent, declare parent : var. You're just saying, from class name parent, give me the var variable, and that's what I want to use in my manifest. It's not too big of a change, but it does require some rewriting of your manifest to just fully declare the variable. In Puppet 2.7, it will warn you where you've done this, so you can upgrade to 2.7, see all the warnings, filter them out, and then upgrade to 3.0. That can be handy. And finally, data binding support. I'm not going to go into details on this because my talk in a couple hours here will go deep dive into data bindings. But effectively, this is about saying, I've declared a class, I have some data that I wish that class to have, but I'm not going to specify that data in my Puppet manifest. I want my Puppet manifest to be the model of my infrastructure, and then I want to have the data about the infrastructure somewhere else. We'll go into detail on that later. Puppet 3 is also way faster than previous versions of Puppet. So this is a customer, up top is a customer supplied graph. Right before 19 there on the graph is when they upgraded from Puppet 2.7 to Puppet 3.0. All of their catalog compilation took a lot less time. They were pretty certain that they broke their Puppet infrastructure when they did this. It is way faster than Puppet 2.7. That's graph on the bottom, I think, is from our own ops team. Had similar results in terms of how it compiles catalogs, how it serves files, all the kind of operations that Puppet does. It's a lot faster. If you wish to see what's coming up in Puppet, including things like the future parser, wish to contribute to those, the open source team have developed this thing called Puppet Armatures. Armatures is sort of other open source projects are using it. It's kind of just a standard format for expressing, hey, I have this idea for Puppet, how you write that idea up. It's kind of just a standard format for that. And it also dictates how you review them, how you get community feedback on them, and so forth. But anyway, if you go to github.com/puppetlabs/armatures, you'll just see all the submissions that people have made for capabilities that they want to add into Puppet. For instance, there's an armature up there now proposing how to do cross-node orchestration so that you can have multiple nodes say, hey, I need a MySQL server and a web server, I need them to be different, but I need them to talk together. You can have Puppet go out and just say, okay, I'm building both, I'm gonna do them in the right order, and then I'm gonna have them talk to each other and share information. So those kind of capabilities that will be in Puppet someday are being discussed here, and you can offer your feedback on that. And the future parser work is also being discussed here. So the Puppet Forge, my project. So I joined the Puppet Forge team, which wasn't a team until I started joining it in July of last year. So about a year now. And that team, I joined in with one engineer, and then we added on a user experience designer, another engineer. That engineer left to another team, and now we have, again, 2 engineers, 1 user experience designer, and myself. But Puppet Forge is a community-driven property, so while Puppet Labs hasn't given it as much love lately as we need to, and we're catching up in that space, the community has been contributing content to it. This is just where you would go and say, hey, I have a module for Apache, I want to share it with others, or I want to consume an Apache module that someone else has written. Either use it as an example, or maybe if the module is good enough, just use it in production right away. So last year, we had just under 300 modules. That has obviously gone kind of crazy lately. We're up to, I think, almost 1,200 now. People are really taking off, sharing their content. It's not just 1,100 Apache modules. It's modules for managing all kinds of different system tools that I've never heard of before, would never have interest in writing a Puppet module for, and that's what the Forge is all about. So some things you might find on there. This is an NTP module that a community member has written. You would just download this module, you declare this class, and it would configure the NTP service with these NTP servers. It's simple like that. You can use the Forge to manage entire solutions. At Puppet Labs, we've written this OpenStack module, which is really a series of modules for managing the components of OpenStack, Rising, Nova, a MySQL database. That INI file module I pointed to earlier is used to manage INI files in OpenStack. And you can declare something like this to just get one machine that is a full OpenStack instance, including the web interface. And that is really great for saying, hey, OpenStack's kind of cool, I want to play with it. Declare that, you have OpenStack, now you can play with it. You can also split these off, there's subclasses, you can actually build production infrastructure with these, and there are people running production infrastructure with these modules to build out their OpenStack environment. So my favorite part of the Forge is actually the utility modules. So up top, Dominic Cleal's Augias Providers modules. This is, how many of you are familiar with what Augias is? Okay, all right, I would have expected more in Red Hat territory, but that's still much better than most people, than most public camps. But Augias is a configuration, it's for managing the individual snippets of a configuration file. So Augias has this own language, and you end up writing these lenses that say, I know how to inspect every element of this file, I know how it's structured, I know what kind of inputs it takes. And it's really well designed for managing configuration files. It does that job, and only that job, and it does it really well. But it has its own grammar to learn. It's actually not super easy to use, but it's a pretty easy grammar. It's not quite as expressive as Puppet's language, but it's still pretty easy. It's kind of things like, I want to set this key to this value. But what Dominic Cleal has done is made a resource type that uses the power of Augias for manipulating configuration files, but gives you an expression like this. You can just say, hey, I want my SSH key config to have permit root login set to no. And you can do that with kernel parameters. You can manage Apache's environments with it. You can manage, obviously, SSH key config. He's got 11 or so types in this module. It's really cool. I really recommend you check that out. And then that last one on the slide is the one I showed you earlier. It's for manipulating INI files. It doesn't use Augias to do that file manipulation, but it's also very expressive to say, this is how I want my INI file constructed. The beauty of both of these modules that I think I can't hammer enough, multiple teams can have multiple public classes that all manipulate the same configuration file. And as long as you're not both declaring the same permit root login with different values, Puppet will manage that config file from these disparate locations, and everything's great. If you're using templates, or you're just declaring a source file, or using a concat pattern, you now have a central source of truth for this file, and no one else can touch it except via that mechanism. Not with this. And that's really liberating for me, especially to say, All right, everybody can manage SSHD config. They can manage their own snippets that they care about. We can all do that here. So let's switch gears to mCollective. mCollective users in the room, raise your hands. Okay, pretty cool. So mCollective is our framework for interacting with your whole infrastructure, gathering information about it in real time, and then taking action. So if Puppet's all about defining the state of your infrastructure and running regularly to make sure your machine is in the state it should be in, mCollective is about reaching out to everything, saying, all right, tell me about yourself, I want to learn about you, and then based on the information that you have, all the facts you have, I'm going to run jobs. It's a framework like Puppet, so out of the box, it only does a small number of things, but you can start adding into it, start wrapping your own workflows around it, and get crazy things. For instance, the author of this managed mail routing with this. Instead of using proper mail routing technologies, he would actually just have this running as his MTA on each of his boxes that would know how to route mail appropriately to save him money on his network transport. Because he would use mCollective to understand how are all my links doing, what bandwidth is available, and how much does each of these links cost. To use facts to determine all this, and then he would route mail appropriately. Forget all the details, but it's kind of insane. But it's about reaching out, real-time discovery, and it's really pretty cool. I'll show you that in the demo. mCollective 2.2x is even more awesome. So this adds in a couple of things. And I'm going to get this a little bit wrong because I'm not as familiar with mCollective as Puppet. But it can now, before mCollective would reach out to all of your machines and do a discovery of all of them at once, and then it does this asynchronous thing where you drop a message into this bus, and then everybody's subscribing to that bus. And so you drop something in that says, hey, all my Red Hat systems need to restart SSHD. And everybody would read that message, and they'd say, am I SSH? They compare the facts, am I Red Hat? No, I'm not Red Hat. Okay, ignore the message. Red Hat machines would say, all right, I need to restart SSH, and that's what they would do. In mCollective 2.2x, you can actually reach out to individual machines and say, I already know who I'm looking for. I don't need all my Red Hat machines. I know the machines I'm looking for. I can reach out and do the same kind of actions. And there's also just a better user interface for interacting with it. There's also a new Puppet agent in it. So this Puppet agent is a thing that would run on all the mCollective machines that you manage, and you can interact with Puppet via mCollective. That gives you a couple of benefits. The first of which is if Puppet ever goes down and just crashes and burns, you can use mCollective to bring it back up. It's not as prevalent anymore, but kind of in the 2.6 days that would happen. But the other thing that it really does well is managing the agent runs. So that you can switch from the model of running Puppet continuously in the background to just letting Puppet live on the system but not actually run as a daemon, and just run the mCollective daemon to do orchestrated Puppet runs. You could say, hey, all my Red Hat machines, go to each of them and run a no-op run now, but only 5 at a time, so I don't stampede my Puppet master. That's something you can do with mCollective that you couldn't do with Puppet. You can manage resource usage. That's what I was just saying about throttling how many runs you do at a time. That's all pretty cool. I'll show you that a little later. It has a summary run to show you how machines have been running Puppet if you're using it that way. In Puppet TV, this is another one of our core projects. And this one's all about the information you're gathering as a result of using Puppet. All your facts, all your functions, all your report data, all that stuff comes into Puppet DB, and it stores all that information and gives you a quick interface for querying all the data about that. So you can query in to say, give me all my reports from these machines from this date and time. And you can also use this as a replacement for store configs. If anybody's using store configs in here, this is so fast. It was specifically designed to make store configs viable for high production deployments. So there's a statistics page you can read about. I won't go into too much detail. It is basically an engine for storing and giving you information about your Puppet runs, their facts, their inventory data, and their reports. So Razor is another project that we have out there. Any Razor users in the room? This was a project that was going on with EMC, and it's about bare metal provisioning. The whole idea behind Razor is that you install this microkernel on each of your bare hardware, and that kernel knows how to figure out how many CPUs does it have, what's the disk like, what's the memory like, and then you build in rules to say, when I have machines that have this many CPUs and this much RAM, they're going to be database servers. They're going to get this operating system of this version, and then they're going to be this classes in Puppet. So that's what it's about. You can check that out on the Forge. If you search for Razor, you can download a module to check it out. But it is all about saying real-time discovery of the hardware you have, boot it into the system it needs to be, so that at the end of the day, you can have a provisioning network that you just plug in. You can plug in the network and the power, it'll boot into the machine it needs to be, and then you can use Puppet to switch the interface on your network switch if you want to. It's still a beta project, as it were. It's not yet into enterprise. It's not yet something we're putting full support commitments around, but it's still getting there. It's getting new releases all the time. Hyra is another one of our projects. This one is about key value lookup. So when you're building your Puppet infrastructure, you have variables that express some piece of data for your resources, whether it's, the most common is like a packaged version. You don't want to hard code that in your model. It might depend on which data center they're in. Are they in a production environment, a development environment? You might want to change that packaged version depending on that. That's a tool Hyra was developed specifically for that kind of a use case. It's built into Puppet 3.0. Again, we're going to go into depth with this in my talk later on. And it's available in Puppet 2.7 if you want to just install Hyra and use it as an add-on. Factor 1.7. So Factor's that tool that says, hey, on this operating system, I have these network interfaces and so on. It got a new version recently. The biggest thing behind that is external facts. If anybody was using the factor.d support in standard lib, this is sort of that +1. It allows you to just say, all right, I have a file on disk, whether that's a static text file that has key value pairs, its fact has this value, or your Perl or Python script that you'll run and will return a key value pair. It doesn't matter. Now Factor can just look at a directory and run any script that's in there or read any file that's in there and return those as key value pairs to be used within Puppet. If you're interested in helping us build better products, we have this Puppet Test Pilot program. It's puppetlabs.com/PTP. You would conduct I've done many of these as product owner for Forge. We basically say we're working on, for Forge, it was an updated search interface for doing sorting and filtering. We'd reach out to the whole list of people saying, hey, if you're interested in helping us build better search and filtering, we want to get your feedback. We can get a gift card or a t-shirt or something like that. It's real easy to get involved and give us the feedback. So Puppet Labs in general, this is our open meeting space where we have Wednesday's lunches. Our CEO, Luke Knies, is on the right there, and my boss, Randall Hansen, our VP of Product and Design, up there as well. So Puppet Labs is a really quickly growing company. When I started in October of 2011, is that right? Yeah, I think so. We were about 30 people. Now in January, we were up to 55, and now we're kind of crazy now. 135, I think, is the number. I can't even keep track anymore. I used to know everyone, what they do, where they live, what their job is. I can't keep up anymore. It's kind of crazy. We have really great people being hired every day, making awesome stuff for you guys to build better systems with. But we're also hiring. If you're interested in working at Puppet Labs, there's a ton of jobs. And there are more being added every day, so don't rely on this list. You would go to puppetlabs.com/jobs, which is on the slide. And finally, since I'm running low on time here, let me move through the training and certification piece. So our professional services engineers would conduct trainings. There would be hands-on courses, and we've been all over the world to do this. And these are where we've specifically done trainings, and our partners have done trainings even more widely than this. And there's a lot of different ways you can have hands-on training for Puppet. The Puppet Fundamentals course is sort of if you're brand new to configuration management or brand new to Puppet, you kind of want to go from the building blocks all the way up to using it to solve real problems. Puppet Fundamentals is that course. It's a 3-day hands-on course led by someone like me who's a sysadmin and knows how to help you learn Puppet. It's a hands-on course again. That's pretty cool. Going beyond that course is the Advanced Puppet course. This one is, you've used Puppet, you want to get some better practices, maybe you're upgrading to Puppet 3.0 or something like that, and you really just want to get a level up on what you're doing with Puppet. Again, that's, I think, a 2-day hands-on course, and that's a 3-day hands-on course, thank you, Tiffany. And also, again, just very hands-on. You will leave with a ton more knowledge about Puppet than you had when you walked in the room. I really loved doing trainings when I was a professional services engineer. Everybody loved them. I really miss doing those. We also have certification along with that. So if you took the fundamentals course and you're using Puppet successfully and you want to get a certification under your belt so you can show that to other people or just have one for your own satisfaction, we have the Puppet Professional course, which is that, hey, I've been using Puppet, I'm confident with it, I know how to use it to solve real problems. It's not something where you go and take our course and then take the exam. It doesn't work like that. The exam is meant to be something that covers you're confident using Puppet, you know what you're doing, and you can come and take that course. You don't have to, you can take that certification. You don't have to take the course to take the certification, but the course will prep you for the cert. On the other side, we have a Puppet Developer certification. So if you extend Puppet with Ruby, you build your own type of dividers, your facts, functions, maybe you hack on Puppet itself. That's a course where you can say to other people, yes, I know how to extend Puppet, I can help you extend it too. So, what questions do you have for me? I will be here all day too if you don't ask me now. But
Do you have support for JRuby?
Support for JRuby is the question. So, no, but about every engineering demo, we have weekly demos that the engineers give off. One engineer is really adamant about adding JRuby support. Every week he's demoing it getting better and better and better. And it's now to the point where we're saying, yeah, let's ship it. So it's going to be in Puppet sometime soon. It's not a super high priority for us to get it there, but the work is done. It just needs to be refined. Did I put you all to sleep? Come on, surely you're here to ask questions about Puppet. See what people have to say about Puppet. All right, well, if you want to learn more, puppetlabs.com, of course, will help you with any of those things. You can go to the /community page to learn more about other events that are coming up. You can go to /education to learn about the training courses that are coming up. We do public trainings all over the United States and some in London and in Europe as well. So those come up regularly. I don't know off the top of my head if there's one coming up in Raleigh soon, but you can see for yourself. That's pretty cool. All right, thanks everybody. Next up we have David Nally, so I think we're going to go right into his talk, and then we're going to have a quick break. All right? It's going to be good.